Welcome everyone to tonight's webinar. We're going to give it a few more minutes as we still have people arriving, and we'll get started here again in a short while. Thanks again for being here. All right, well, welcome again. Thank you so much for joining and being part of tonight's Tennessee Family Series. As you know, the theme of this, if this is your first time joining, is embrace the change, and the idea being how can we equip you with the tools and the skills to be able to support your student as they journey through their time here and their volunteer experience. And so we're glad to have you. My name is Byron Hughes. I have the awesome opportunity to serve as the Assistant Vice Chancellor and Dean of Students, and to work with folks like my colleagues that are here tonight that I'm gonna talk with and lead a discussion with. As a reminder, for tonight's session, we asked for questions to be submitted to the family engagement team ahead of time. So because of this, we have disabled the Q&A feature to allow our session to focus on the conversation. And we've gathered those questions and we have incorporated them into what we will talk with our panelists about tonight. At the end of the session, we will share the contact information for both offices represented here so you can reach out to them if you have any additional questions. So again, I'm very excited tonight because we have the opportunity to talk with some folks who can tell us a whole lot about particularly things as it relates to well-being and wellness initiatives, and then certainly how we focus in on student success and the lives of your students here academically, personally, and socially. So I'm going to allow my colleagues, Maxine and Aaron, to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about who they are and tell you what their roles are here on campus. And then we're going to get started with our conversation tonight. So I hope you enjoy this, and I hope we're able to, again, equip you in the right types of ways to be able to support your students in their success here at UT. So we'll start with Aaron. If you want to tell us, Aaron, who you are, a little bit about yourself and the role that you serve.
Thanks, Dr. Hughes. So my name is Aaron Dixon. I serve as the director for the UT Success Academy, which is a program originally designed to support our Black and Hispanic men coming to the university. But I also work in our division of student success, whose full responsibility is to support the well-being of our students as they come into and through the university. This is everything from the time that they come through orientation to the time that they get ready to prepare to become alum of the university. I've been at the university for about 6 years now. I have moved around to a few different departments and the division of student life and now in student success. So excited to be here to share a bit of time with you all tonight.
All right, thanks so much, Aaron, for being here with us. Maxine, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and the role you serve here in the community.
Thank you. So my name is Maxine Osho. I serve as Assistant Director for the Center for Health, Education, and Wellness, referred to as CHEW here at UTK. I've been in my position for about 1.5 years. I'm originally from North Carolina, so students who are coming from out of state or transferring I'm familiar with that experience of coming into the volunteer community. In my role, I mainly serve under our prevention initiatives. So that's looking at alcohol and other drug prevention, sexual and relationship violence prevention, as well as our collegiate recovery program. But our department as a whole focuses on, again, health education and then the wellness of our students on campus.
Thanks so much, Madeline. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started with our questions. And Madeline, the first one is for you. Given the work that you do within SHU and working with health education and wellness, I think it might be helpful to frame tonight's conversation around this idea of what does it mean? What does wellness mean? What are those 8 dimensions? Briefly describe those. And how is it important to students and important to their families and supporters?
Thank you for that. So here at UTK, we follow the federal substance abuse mental health service administration's 8 dimensions definition, because we recognize that wellness is multifaceted and you need a bunch of different components in order for an individual to be whole in their wellness. And so to quickly run through them, they are emotional, spiritual, intellectual, physical, environmental, financial, occupational, and social. And so when we briefly talking about each of those, emotional, we're talking about how do we process our feelings and emotions, and that encompasses our mental health. Spiritual is what do we find our peace, our balance? Is it through a higher being? Is it through meditation? Intellectuals, how are we stimulating our mind? How are we challenging ourselves, expanding our knowledge, thinking critically? Physical, again, is looking at our diet and how are we staying physically active. Environmental can be our personal living space or the larger environment. Are we getting out in nature? Financial is self-explanatory in the sense of like, how are we managing our budget, our funds? Occupational, for our students, that may be their job of being a student, but we know some students also have a job on top of being a student. And so how do we manage those demands of us and our work obligations, and how we're being fulfilled in our jobs? And then social, recognition that we need a community to support us and uplift us, and how are we nurturing and building up that social community?
That's great. And I think it's really important because it's probably about now during the semester when a lot of those aspects of wellness start feeling pretty depleted because they have been running what is essentially a marathon. And in some ways, probably they've been sprinting in that marathon too. So that's really, really helpful, I think, for us to be able to know, and certainly for families to be able to hear. One of the reasons, obviously, why we're also doing this webinar tonight is to help our families think about next week when many of their students are going to be returning back to the place that they call home, and or they might be doing it in about 4 weeks, right, when the semester is over. So, Madeline and Aaron, and we can start with you, Aaron. Obviously, students are going to be feeling a little bit overwhelmed returning to campus following Thanksgiving break. There's so many things that have been happening academically, particularly maybe things have not been going so well, or there's stress in other aspects of their lives. What do you typically advise family members to do to ease and encourage their students about that return?
Yeah, like you said, like around this time, students are depleted. They are burnt out. They're tired. They don't. I can't even get them to an event while offering food right now. So they are burnt out in just about every area. What I would say is to give your students some time to settle in and collect themselves, especially going into this upcoming break, this Thanksgiving break that's coming up. Because when they return, they're going like right into final season. I would save conversations about, like how are they feeling about the semester in general until we get ready for the holiday break, the longer break that they have. So that when they go home for these first 2 3 days, get them time to settle in, collect themselves, obviously check in and see how they're feeling, just to get a sense of pulse of where they are. You'll have, a range of responses from I'm feeling really great, and when you have those, celebrate them, right? Celebrate those wins. You'll have a few students who are not feeling so great, but help encourage them and remind them that they are talented, that they've gotten to this point, because of their talent, right? And we all fail at some point. No matter who we are, there's always going to be some level of failure in the things that we're doing, but we have to remember the goal. What is the goal? How do we continue to encourage ourselves and encourage our students to get back up and try it again? So I think the biggest thing here is to make sure that we're giving them time. No, we got to have time before we start to have those conversations that could potentially add an additional stress before final season.
That's right, Aaron, because I mean, for so many of our students, they are high achieving folks. They want to do really, really well. And this idea, right, that I mean, they know where their shortcomings are, but they need that time to be able to pause and just reflect and kind of be still, as opposed to heightened and having to maybe defend, or explain something that's not been going well.
Yeah, I'll say, I think too, especially for our first year students, like they have excelled for their full life, right? Like up until this point, they have not had this type of challenge yet. And so I think it's all newness, and so having to deal with that newness, having to deal with an extended level of challenge is going to be, it's frustrating for some students. And so it's our responsibility to help them feel comfortable and kind of settle some of those feelings as they go into final season.
Yeah. Magdalene, I know, and you can certainly answer this as well about how students are going to be feeling returning to campus, but I also know too that, your team spends a great deal of time with our Center for Care and Resilience and our counseling team. What are some of the things that you all are typically hearing about why a student might be feeling overwhelmed about just going home? Like what's on their mind, right, about this trek, this journey that they're going to have to be able to be around a table or whatever, right? Whatever being back at the place they call home looks like. I mean, what are they saying and what are y'all hearing?
I think some of it is to what Aaron's point of them being, they had new stressors, especially if they're their first year student, or even if they're in their last year, of trying to prepare themselves for that transition of coming out of that college routine. The reality of that starting to set in, especially as they get closer to the end of this fall semester. So we see a lot of students are just nervous about coming home because they're thinking about finals and how are they going to finish everything. I will say sometimes students also feel overwhelmed because they've been away for so long, and some people are coming back to really excited family to see them, and they're like, well, I got family who's excited to see me, I got friends who excited to see me, but I also want to sleep. And so in that vein of like getting prepared is like having them you know having that conversation with them of like, well, what do you plan for this break, because it is a shorter break, and have them really think about what is the time I'm going to set aside to meet with my friends? What is the time I'm going to set aside for family? So they don't feel that stress of I'm being pulled in all these different directions. And I'm not also giving myself some time to just decompress and rest. The other thing I would say, just as an aside, because it is a shorter break, and I know the tendency is like, I want to sleep in as much as I can, but really encourage your student to stick to a sleep routine. And I say that because it will help transition them back into school. So whatever their routine is, where they normally get up for that first class that they have in the day, try to keep that routine during these next 2 to 3 days so that it's not so jarring when they come back the following Monday and they got to get ready for that 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock a.m. class that they've been going to all semester.
Sure. I think about also as a campus, we have embraced the philosophy of being strengths-based and our partnership with Gallup to help our students know and understand their Clifton strengths. And what that means for us is that we don't spend a lot of time with our students being talking about their lives in a deficit type of way. And so when I think about our students returning back to wherever they call home around with their family or supporters, that may not necessarily be the context, right, for how life is there. So the student coming home and at that time saying, yeah, that the math class I've been in, I failed both exams and I probably am going to not get above a C in that class. I think a natural reaction from some families might be, why not? What are you even doing? Like, what are you doing with your time there? And of course, what we tend to do is say, let's talk about this a little bit more, right? Like what did go well for you, right? I mean, I think that's also important when we think about how parents and family members can provide ease and encouragement for their students, because hope is what they're going to need in order to be able to make it through and persist over the next couple of weeks when they get back here. And then certainly what they will need in terms of being able to develop a better plan for success in the spring semester. So, I always tell family members, just be patient, try to speak to the positive, and also I think recognize too that sometimes when a student gets there, they're going to also be overwhelmed by some personal things related to roommates and all other types of circumstances. And you're going to hear some stories and wonder, I need to call somebody right now, right? On Wednesday evening at 8 p.m., I'm calling the university. Even though those folks are probably not even there, I'm calling anyway, right? Or I'm emailing the dean and trying to figure out what's going on. And you have to pause and say, okay, are you venting, or is there something that I need to help you with, right? To be able to figure out, again, because we return agency back to a student as much as possible. So that's really important. Well, when we're thinking, Madeline and Aaron, about the conversations and the important conversations and questions that need to take place during this short period of time while they're off, what should some of those be about when a student is returning home and kind of adjusting? And Madeline, you brought up one good point, right, about sleep schedules and how you need to kind of stay to or stick to a sleep schedule while you're there. But what are some other things, right, that families should be thinking about, whether it be about reasonable boundaries, expectations, curfew, while you're at home, which is not something that they have here, mental health support, anything that you all might want to offer or share with our parents and family members?
Yeah, I'll say, and I think it's tricky because there's two breaks, right? Like you have the short break, but then you have a longer break that's coming up. And so I think in terms of this shorter break that's coming up, the main goal really is to get them through finals, and so asking them, doing some check-ins, like, how are you? How are you, mentally? And if there's a different way to reframe that, because some students will be like, yeah, I'm doing fine mentally. There may be a different way to reframe that. Like, how are you? How are you eating? Are you making friends? How are you feeling about classes? Are you stressed? Asking some of those questions in a way that doesn't seem like you're giving them another quiz when they come home, right? And so you have to understand. I know that some families talk to their students quite often throughout the semester, but we also have to understand that our students have not been living with us for the last 5 months. And so there may be some things that we are not as used to in terms of the communication with our students. And so how do we work with them to negotiate, what might be an appropriate time for you to be back in the house? What might be some other expectations that we need to set in terms of you transitioning back into living at home until you get ready to go back to campus. And so some of those conversations are going to be essential as the students begin to transition back home, for sure.
And to just, if you don't mind, Brian, to add on to what Aaron was saying, is that, some of those questions, especially for this shorter break, so it doesn't feel like a quiz, maybe like, hey, you've been gone. We almost at the final end. What has been going really well at school right now? And start from that point so they can talk about the good things that going on. And then if they're like, even if they say not a lot's been going well, it's been a struggle. Well, what's been struggling? What's been the struggle? What have you been struggling with, to just ease your way into that conversation so it doesn't feel like I'm interrogating you or trying to figure out the nitty gritty. In addition, when you're talking about like the expectations of how long you are going to be out when you're back home, because I had one of those parents who expected me to not be out all night. You might need to have that conversation this week or this weekend before they get home, so it doesn't feel like a shock to the system where they can be like, well, I'm grown, I'm an adult. We've already had this conversation before you came back to the house. So again, we're easing that transition and setting those expectations before we even get back home.
Madeline, I love the idea of the highs and lows. I think something that often ask students, like, what's your favorite class and what's your least favorite class? They have a least favorite class because that's the one that's giving them the most issues right now. And so if we can talk about, like, what is your least favorite class, what makes it your least favorite class, and it kind of eases them into the conversation about, what is going really well, what's not going so well. And so when we do, end up having a longer conversation, it's not as hard for them to talk about it. Because I think we talk about, like, this expectations that students have of themselves, along with the additional stressors of, like, final season. But you also have to remember that our families, we add a lot of stress to, what a student is expecting too, or what a student thinks is expected. And so when we come home as students, we need them to know that our families are their supporters, and not attempting to add any additional stress in the process. So,
Aaron, one of the things I love about the way you frame that question about your highs and lows and what's your favorite class and least favorite class is that it also allows a family member to start to kind of get drilled down. Again, doesn't feel like an interrogation, but I'm drilling down to the thing that might be the real core issue, right? So the assumption could be, oh, you've been wasting time and you're not applying yourself and you're not going to class where you should be. And it actually could be, this actually isn't appealing to my interest and my passion. I mean, I've always said, as a higher professional, I've been doing this for 20 years. I think one of the unfortunate things that we do, which I know we have to do because the way we're designed, is we force a student to pick a major the summer before they actually even get into college, right?
Yes.
And so you're making a decision probably based around something that feels interesting to you, but not probably based in, is this my gift, my talent? Am I naturally skilled here for the rest of my life? And
Yes.
so I question the way that you framed it, Aaron, about what's good and what's not so well, right? And what's your favorite, least favorite gets to, are you actually in the right major, right? Because then the conversation with the family might be, might she want to take a look at something different, and how do you set across or set about the process of engaging with an academic advisor or the academic
Yes.
success center to try to figure out what is the major and where should I actually be?
Yeah, I love that. I think because we've talked about stressors and we talked about, students, just not feeling well. But another thing is students not being motivated, you know, because I think that's another conversation when a student comes and say, I'm just not motivated. I just don't want to do anything, because it's not necessarily they can't do the work at that point, is that I just don't want to do anything, and so I think when students start to talk about them not being motivated, that's when we need to figure out, like, are you interested in what you're doing? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you're interested, you're going to be dialed in. And if you're not interested, then you could care less about going to whatever class and talking to whatever professor that's on your schedule, and so I like that we need to get a little bit deeper into, what are you really interested in, and what do you think it is that you want to do?
Because if you're not interested in class, that's when all of a sudden I become more interested in hanging out.
Yes.
That's the thing that takes over, right?
100%.
Matt, Celine, I'm wondering about conversations about mental health support. This is we know this is a time developmentally for students and for just human beings where mental health needs start to present in ways that some people have never had to present before. And in fact, you might start seeing some things then around mental health that you probably never saw before. So what might conversations or questions be like related to mental health support, and whether it's something that's new that a student is experiencing or something that they've always been managing, but maybe they're having a hard time managing just because of how busy life is here and the way that they might become distracted in one area of their life and maybe put down, like they put down their own well-being in order to be able to pursue some other things. So what would that conversation look like for family?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to, again, how do you frame it? And so if you see especially if it's something new and not something that you've had to deal with your student, if you see a significant change in their demeanor during this Thanksgiving break, especially I would say as they get closer to returning back to campus, because if they're going through mental health stressors and it's because of the classes they're taking or because of the environment of maybe they don't have the social circle they want, it can manifest as they get closer to the realization of I have to go back to campus because they may not be excited for what's waiting for them. A simple question to ask them is like, hey, are you happy at UTK? If you notice those changes. And that way it doesn't put any pressure on them. It's not saying, hey, you look blue, you look down. It's just saying, are you happy at UTK? Are you excited to go back to UTK? And you can get a range of answers, but it can at least get you to start to think, or get an idea of what are they feeling and how are they experiencing their college career at this point. And if they seem like they are open and willing to tell you their struggles, if it is mental health, if they're having a hard time processing their emotions, go with them to the counseling center. The counseling center here at UTK, they have one-on-one sessions, but they also have a lot of group therapy sessions. I know one of them that they told me about, they have like a Black Girl Magic group therapy. But they have also even provide couples counseling, because we know that, and when I say couples counseling, yes, it can be intimate partners, but it can also be friendships, because we know some students have formed friends, came with friends, and there may have been some clashing of dynamics in their time since they've started school here, and they don't know how to process that. And so that could be a resource. But if they need something more in depth, there are online options like BetterHelp. They can look for an online or telehealth or local therapist through sites like Psychology Today as a starting point, to find more of that in-depth one-on-one long-term counseling services if that is what they need. But for the also in between minor things, the Center for Care and Resilience is a great resource. The students are referred to as 974 Help as a resource, because they can help them in that intermediate minor stressors that they may be experiencing.
And what's great about 974 Help is that families can make referrals as well, and they can provide they can submit an online form as well to the Center for Care and Resilience, and the center would be there waiting on the Monday after Thanksgiving break to be able to do connections with students and get them where they need to be, particularly if they're in distress. One of the things I also tend to see too, that for a long time I've always talked to families about is what happens when maybe your student just looks different, right? So, hair color is different. Maybe there's a piercing that wasn't there before. Maybe there's a tattoo on your student that you didn't know about, or maybe their body shape has changed in some particular way, or maybe they're just dressing a whole lot differently. And the ability to acknowledge it and to just go with it, but at the same time, couple that, right, with Magdalene, what you have observed about, if there's something else that's happening, then yeah, that could be the sign of something of distress. But to also know that it could be the sign of I'm trying on new things, and sometimes we used to notice it right away. Family drops off if a student's in their first year. Family drops off the student for move-in, and then by that night, the student was completely different than they did when they showed up and checked into the residence hall. So that idea of kind of going with what you see in front of you and recognizing that's what we're doing. If we're not allowing our students to be able to think about themselves and their place in the world and how they are and how their views, perspectives, and identities, then we're probably doing a true disservice to them as a learning experience. So hopefully, families, you can be prepared for that too. So, Magdalene, you provided one way of parents being able to contact us if they're concerned about how their student is doing. What are some other ways in which parents, and maybe Aaron, you can also chime in here too and lead with this, if a parent is concerned or family member is concerned about their student's performance on campus and how they're doing, particularly when it comes to classes and faculty members, academic advisors, how can they get to us on campus, and who should they get to be able to really address those concerns?
Well, that's a great question. I feel like there's a lot of avenues. It just depends on where they want to start. Like I said, the Center for Care and Resilience is a great one. We talked about it from the standpoint of mental health, but they really are all encompassing. So they can help students if they are struggling with the class and need a guided help of how do I talk to that professor to figure out a game plan of like, how can I move forward or finish the year or semester, I should say, strong. They can help them if they have issues with financial. And so if it is a financial stress, the Center for Care and Resilience or One Stop We also have a whole financial wellness center, could be a great resource. I would say the dean of students can be a great resource that parents can reach out to help their students, to help navigate the different areas that they may be having. If it's a roommate situation, obviously housing or dean of students can help them navigate of like, how can we remediate this? Or if it needs to be, how can we look at maybe finding them a different place to stay to finish out the year so that they are comfortable in their living space? Going back to that environmental wellness.
Yeah, that's right.
I think part of it too is, finding out what is the root issue. Is it more academic? Is it more social? Is it more mental? Is it, one of those dimensions that Madeline mentioned? Like what exactly is happening, right? And if we're talking about performance specifically, how do we encourage and empower them to take those steps, right? How do we empower them to go and talk to a peer learning assistant? How do we empower them to go and talk to an academic coach? One of the things that I like to tell our group, because we recruit very high performing students that come to the University of Tennessee, and I like to tell our students, think about, what it takes to be great. Like think about someone who you might think is the greatest in whatever field it is that they're in. I use an example. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with Kobe Bryant, but he's a I think a universal name that most people would know. But Kobe Bryant went to the NBA directly from high school, so he went into the NBA already great, but he spent a lot of time um, practicing before and after everyone. He was there on game day before and after everyone. And sometimes our students don't understand how important it is for practice. They're here for academics. How important is that academic practice? Those peer learning assistant sessions, those academic coaching meetings. They don't want to go talk to an academic coach. But even Kobe Bryant had a coach. He had multiple coaches along his way, and finished in the NBA as one of the top players. And so I think helping to normalize the services that the university has to offer is not something that's telling them that they can't do this or they can't be this person. But our jobs are to really help give them the tools that they need to maintain the greatness that they came to the university with. So I think helping encourage them to see what the resources that the university offers, and taking those steps to begin to seek some of those resources as well.
Great. And, one of the things that I advise families to also do is, in those good moments of asking questions about a student's performance, is to not assume or have a position, right, about a situation until you have the ability to make contact. And certainly, we know that we want to involve everybody in that conversation. We want the student part of that conversation. We want their families part of that conversation. But what you may hear from your student is one aspect of that experience. And so when you're reaching out, it's reaching out to ask questions, right? Because if it doesn't sound right to you, then you want to get more information. And if it does sound right to you, you want to be able to figure out, hey, what's happening here that we may not necessarily know about, right? As we try to figure out a plan for the student success and how we can make sure that their performance is increased as best as possible. So, Aaron, this next question, I'll start with you. Some of our students will opt, obviously, to take courses during the winter mini term as a way to cut into their break. But what are some ways that families can encourage their students to really find that time to just simply decompress and stay motivated?
Yeah, I think honestly having a conversation about, what is the goal, right? Like why is your student wanting to take winter term classes? Is it that they are trying to make up a class that they didn't do so well in the fall, or are they trying to stay on track? Do they need this class? What is the big goal here? In helping them kind of understand and reframe, do you really need to take these classes during the winter term? And if they decide that it's their decision to do that, how can I, as a family member, continue to be there as a support system with them? Obviously, this will have some impact on the amount of time that families will be able to see their student. And so I think that starts with a conversation on, you know, having a conversation about like, well, when will I be able to see you? You know, setting the expectations on, you know, I know that you have things that you want and that you need to do. And so I want to, you know, just set the expectations so that we both know, you know, when we will have an opportunity to be able to see each other. But really understanding what the goal is, you know, reframing that it's not about like, I don't want to be at home, I don't want to see my family, but what is the student's goal, and how can we help them get to that point? So,
Leslie, would you add anything to that?
I would add to that, you know, when thinking about doing a winter time, as Aaron said, it would cut into their winter break. So if they feel like they come to the decision they need to keep them on track or whatever the reason may be, maybe again that pre-planning of, well, what does your schedule look like?
mm-hmm.
And then looking at that schedule, where are you going to dedicate time to give yourself some mental breaks? Because it is going to cut into their winter break, and part of the winter break is to help them reset, get a clean slate, and try to reset the brain. Because I know I talked about intellectual wellness, but we cannot be at a 100 the whole time when we're trying to think academically or critically. We have to give our brains those moments of rest. And so, when are in your break? What are you going to give yourself that time to have a mental break, and maybe even push it to, well, what does a mental break look like for you? And to start thinking about that, because for some of our students, especially when we talk about our freshmen, some of them were athletes before they came here, and they really found enjoyment and that mental stimulus break by being physically active. They may or may not have been able to be active as much as they want to so far. So how are we going to incorporate that back into your life so that you can then do better, perform better academically? Maybe it's listening to music, maybe it's simple as going for a walk, maybe it is taking a nap, but how are we being intentional of having those breaks in between while we accomplish these academic goals?
Sure. Yeah. And I think, no time is better than when you're at in a home setting like winter term to be able to really think about what a break looks like and what a normal schedule can look like in terms of taking care of yourself, because you don't have a whole, I mean, you may have things going on, you may have a job going on, you might be taking care of people, who knows what you might be doing, right? But you're not doing it in the context of being at UT for the most part, where it is just constant all day long and you're trying to keep up with so many different things. So it's truly being able to focus in on what is break like, because it's really the only time. I mean, we do encourage students, particularly during summer, to either take summer term classes, to be involved in an internship or a co-op, or to do a lot of different things, or just simply to work, right? Because you got to financially be able to take care of yourself. Winter term is probably the only time that you really get the chance to really have a good pause, because a lot of people are also pausing at the same time, to kind of just to slow down a bit. So that's a really helpful thing. Um, well, one of the things that we know about our students, and yeah, I brought up this aspect of Clifton Strengths, which for those of you that don't know, and you probably have heard us say this before, every student at the University of Tennessee, upon entry into UT, has the opportunity to take the Gallup Clifton Strengths Assessment, where they get to learn about their top 5 Clifton Strengths. And we've been doing this now for about 4 years, and so we are really at the point where mostly every student has had the opportunity to be invited to do this. And we've had some great success in being able to continue information and learning about what this means. But one of the things we paid attention to is what are the average top 5 strengths? There's 34 Clifton strengths that everyone has and everyone is equipped with, but obviously the top 5 are the ones that we tend to pay the most attention to. And believe it or not, achiever is the number 2 common strength amongst our entire student population. And so for the past 4 years, as students have been taking the Clifton Strengths Assessment, achiever is consistently ranked as number 2. Achiever is defined as a strength where people are thinking about checking off the list and being accomplished at what they do, which also means that they are really, really good at setting goals. Now, what they may not be so good about is figuring out what are the right goals to set, right? And being thoughtful about those goals. Just set the goals to get it done, because that's how they're wired together and put together. So to both of you, Magdalene and Aaron, how can families have some intentional conversations about goal setting for the next semester? thoughtful, intentional, meaningful, focused on what things are going to be energizing for them. But again, how can they have some intentional conversations about this?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, we talked about doing highs and lows, right? The first thing is like what went well, like what energized you, what made you excited, what did you think went really well, and how can you celebrate those things as a family member? But then what do you think could have went better? I think a lot of times students have a lot to say, but we don't often ask them the right questions. And asking them what, in their opinion, do they think could have been better, and how do we set goals around some of those things? If you want to get a gold star, we talk about Clifton strengths, and the students should know those strengths. I would highly encourage our families to ask students about those strengths. How do they, like, what is their favorite strength? How do they see those strengths play out this past semester? Is there a strength that they would like to use a little bit more going into the next semester? Is there a specific goal that they have for the semester? And like Dean Hughes said, like, is this the right goal based off what you said could have been better, right? And so how do we create a list of priorities to address as we go into the new semester? So it all starts with, really understanding what went well, what did not go so well, and how can we improve from this point.
Well, even I agree with everything Aaron said, but to even expand upon that, once they tell you their Clifton strengths and maybe even how they feel like it manifested, if you wanted to, because you can look up sort of the definition of how Clifton defines those strengths, but as they tell you their strengths, you as family, if you can acknowledge or highlight even of the things that they didn't showcase or didn't feel like they showcase, and maybe like saying, well, I see this strength in you all the time, and this is how it manifests for you. Because I think sometimes our students don't recognize their strengths. They don't recognize how they've utilized those strengths, or recognize how the things that they do naturally is considered a strength. And so sometimes reminding them of that and how it manifests in their day-to-day life can be helpful. And then, to think about when they talk about the things that went well and didn't go well, of like, well, how did this go well for you? The things that they talked about going well. If, getting their schoolwork done went really, really well, and they are, rocking on their midterms and they feel good about their finals. Well, what did you do to make you feel really good about in those areas? And the areas that didn't go well, what do you think could have been, what did you need to do better in those areas? For some of our students, it's, well, I needed to make a list. Okay, well, what could we do to help you have a system so you can have a list that you can, actually accomplish it? For some people, it's a planner. Maybe they need a whiteboard in their dorm. Maybe they need to have a big display somewhere they can check off. Maybe it's digital, whatever that system or thing is that they need. That's where you can get a little bit deeper and really think about concretely for them, what systems do they need to be successful and improve in the areas that they want to improve upon.
Great. Madeline, what are maybe some goals for the spring semester that could be rooted in physical and emotional types of well-being, the things that keep them healthy and well here so they can pursue and achieve those academic specific goals?
For the emotional, again, I think it goes back to sometimes even asking as a family member, asking them, how can we support you? When we think about our students, some of our students want to be seen as adults and they're very excited to have their independence. Some of them feel that way, but they may have moments where they're like, I really could use a weekly check-in. And they may have really wanted family to come visit, but we know some family can't make that journey to Knoxville to visit. If you can't make that journey, maybe it's like, maybe I send you care packages with some of the things that make you feel good, that make you feel like you're back at home, or that people back at home are cheering you on and are loving on you in that way. Maybe it's the random e-cards, as far as the emotional. When we talk about that physical, again, it's figuring out for your student what benefits them, what gives them energy. If they have a meal plan, well, what are the things in the dining hall that you really enjoy eating? How can that look and be intentional? We do have a nutritionist in our dining hall. Maybe it's scheduling a meeting with them to figure out what foods can you be eating to like energize you and make you feel good. We have rec sports. They do outdoor pursuits. They do a lot of different adventures around East Tennessee. They have a lot of different classes. We have a beautiful big campus. Maybe it's just being intentional, going for a walk in between your classes to really clear your head and get that physical, get the blood pumping that way.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's really good, right? Because they just need to have a balance of all these types of goals because they're living here. They're not just here going to class and trying to pursue a degree. They're living in this environment, whether it's on campus or off campus, whether they're a first year student, a senior, or even a graduate student, professional student, they're living here. And so those goals have to be part of how they, as a whole person, can certainly be their very best here in our community. So, well, my last question for y'all is what, if you kind of roll back in your own minds back to when you were in college, uh, what was the best piece of advice that you received when you were starting a new semester?
I think this is a great piece of advice. Not that I took it, and now I'm the one kind of giving it. And I'm sure that a lot of our families do this already. But don't hesitate to ask for support when you get back to campus. Right, this is a restart. Everything is going to be new. Really encouraging them, saying like, "Hey, look, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for making it up until this point, and you about to rock this next semester coming up." And during the process, like, don't hesitate to ask for support because you got a community of people that's up there that are passionate about supporting you as a student. And so take advantage of those resources while you can. And again, I got that advice. I did not use it. And maybe until like my third year in school, and I wish I had have used those resources earlier. And so I think just continuing to reintroduce those resources to them and encouraging them along the way.
Yeah, the best piece of advice. So I was very fortunate that my mom was a counselor, school-based counselor. So she just was like overflowing with advice, and she actually helped students transition from high school to college. And so again, is that spring semester, looking at spring semester of like, hey, we get to hit the reset button. It's a clean slate. It's a new opportunity and chance to try again. And really of the mindset of, because we have such high achievers, and I was one of those students, is as long as you did your very best in that coursework, having those family members reassure them that we are proud of you no matter what. We know we like our students like to get those A's and B's and makes the dean's list, but we're going to also celebrate those C's. If you did your very best and you took advantage of every opportunity, then that was the best you could do. And we are so proud of you because you passed that class and you're moving forward of accomplishing your goal, which is graduating from UT. And so having that mindset, and that mindset of that every adversity is an opportunity to move forward, to progress, because we know that life is going to happen for our students. As much as we would love to protect them for everything's not going to be great, but having them have that knowledge and advice of like, hey, an adversity doesn't mean the end. It just means it gives you an opportunity for growth and finding new pathways.
That's great. I love both of those things so much, right? I think it is at the essence and the core of what we're reminding students over and over and over again. Even if we didn't take the advice ourselves, it's the reason why we're good at the jobs that we do working in higher education, because we didn't always take that advice maybe and had to figure it out. But now we're great at being able to equip our students to do the same. So I really appreciate all that you all have shared with us tonight. And I know our families and supporters do too. So the actual last question though really is, so if our families and supporters that are here with us tonight or will be watching this on the recorded version want to figure out the best way to get connected to you all, what's the best way for them to do that?
You want to go, Melanie?
Sure. So we have our website. If you just want to know more about my department, the Center for Health Education and Wellness is at wellness.utk.edu. You can also email us at wellness@utk.edu. That will get you in contact with our office, and we will respond to those questions you may have. If you didn't remember all the other departments that we mentioned, you can email us and we will try to connect you with those different offices and resources.
Yeah, and so for us, there's a few different opportunities to connect with our division. You can go to studentsuccess.utk.edu, and we can connect you with whatever department it is that you're looking for. Maybe it might be your academic success center, or it might be career development, your veteran success, your first year experience, and we can get you connected there. If you're wanting to contact me directly, you can email me at Aaron, Aaron, at utk.edu, and I'll be happy to connect with any family members.
Yeah, and mine is really easy. It's mosho@utk.edu.
Oh, that's great. And as Madeline mentioned also, obviously the Office of Dean of Students is here for you as well. As we always say, if you don't know where to go or where to start with us, the Dean of Students office, and we know how to get you to Madeline. We know how to get you to Aaron, their colleagues, anyone around the university that can help, particularly as we're helping our students kind of work through the continued changes and transitions that they will go through. So again, thank you, Madeline. Thank you, Aaron. I know that there's a lot going on right now, particularly as we're wrapping up this part of the term and heading into Thanksgiving, and then the rush is on certainly for the end of the term. So thanks again for spending some time with our families and supporters. Like I said, I know they appreciate it, and I'm sure they will be in touch with your teams if there's something that you need. Families and supporters, thank you. It's good to be with you all tonight, and we look forward to being able to continue working with you to be able to make sure that we support your student success and well-being, and really doing whatever it takes to ensure that there is increase in both success and well-being. Good luck as your student returns, or you see your student over the Thanksgiving break and the break that will follow that. We look forward to seeing you again here soon to share some more information and introduce you to some other colleagues around UT that are here to help. Have a good night, and as always, go Vols.
Go Vols.